And we're live.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you right now. Just know that you are locked in on To The Point with
Skip
and the King. You guys know where to find Simon Broder on simonbroder.com, amazon.ca. Go buy that book for your children. It's a great read for them. You can find him at Dougie J's on Twitter. It's baseball season. You know he loves it right now. You guys get at him. I love watching you guys get at him. Skip, you also just recently published a new article. I'm proud of you, my friend.
short story, not an article. Short story in Econoclash review. I'm going to send the link to that at the bottom of the show in the YouTube description. Link to econoclash.com. You can also actually find a copy of Running the Point at storyshares.org. I'm going to add the link to that at the bottom of the description. But yeah, let's move on and introduce our new guest.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Skip. You guys know where to find myself, King Hussein, on all social media platforms. You guys can find Skip and myself on To The Point, Facebook and Instagram, To The Point Raps on Twitter, and youtube.com/To The Point podcast. And tonight, we are elated, delighted, jubilated, and excited to have this man right here, Robert Misovic.
Thanks, man.
It's so great. We appreciate it, man. Is there anywhere else anybody can find you? Because I know your resume is too long for me to list.
Nope. I'm here. That's all we need. You can Google me if you really want. If you want to find out anything else, you can Google me. That sounds a little bit pretentious to say it, but let's just wrap it up. Yeah.
I got nothing but love for you, man, because you do a lot of work and I enjoy your work that I see. So I got to ask you, Robert, since you're here, this is the main reason why. You and I were up the other night till real late talking about this. Kwame Brown has basically broken the internet when it comes to basketball, okay? And a lot of people out there do not know who Kwame Brown is. I know you know. Can you enlighten us? Can you tell us and everybody else out there who Kwame Brown is, my friend?
Sure, I'll tell you who he is first by telling you who he's not. Okay, he is not a bona fide scrub. He is not the worst player who ever played in the NBA. He's not any of those things. He is a young man. He's 39 years old today. He was the first overall pick by the Washington Wizards in 2001. Came straight out of high school, right? He grew up in the South.
We could throw up that graphic.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy, man. He was real quiet for about 20 years, right? And he let a lot of people do talking for him, right? He didn't say a word. For a bust, he did play over a decade in the NBA. He made over $63 million, right? And he started out at 13 in the free lunch program because he was one of eight kids to a single mother. And I don't want to get any heat on me right now by mentioning the fact that his father did go to prison for murder when he was just a kid, and he did not really grow up with his father. So this is a success story that has been painted as a failure by the media for a lot of years now. And you know what? Kwame set the record straight the past week. He lit a lot of people on fire. Yes. He did break the internet, as you say. Yes. But I think this was a distraction. I think he's got a larger point to make. He's grown from 1,000 subscribers this time last week, I believe, to almost over 200,000 on YouTube.
And his personal YouTube channel got canceled.
Say what?
Which he did speak about. He spoke about his personal YouTube channel getting canceled.
Bus Life?
Because of what he said.
Kwame Brown Bus Life?
Yeah, well,
so.
It's still up. I just watched it.
He did say a lot of controversial things, so I'm not surprised if he yeah, I don't know the whole story about his YouTube getting canceled. I know I couldn't find the videos directly on his YouTube. I had to find them through other sources, so it's possible that the original channel got removed. He did say a lot of he did say a lot of controversial things on there, a lot of swear words, a lot of slurs, a lot of threats.
A lot of things you can't say.
A lot of things I couldn't say, and it's not even about whether I could say them, whether anyone could say them. I just don't think he was being productive. I think he was doing it for the likes. I think he got subscribers out of it. I think that's what he was going for. I don't know though. Like, to me, it's a whole lot of something out of nothing here. Like, a couple guys went on a podcast and said a couple things about how Kwame Brown was not a successful NBA player. They're not the first to say it. Hundreds of people have been slandering Kwame Brown for 20 years now, because ever since he went to the Wizards, never lived up to the hype, never was deserving of being a first overall pick. You could say, yeah, he had a successful career, managed to stick around the NBA, but he was never what you expect out of a number one overall pick. He was a bust. And that's just facts. So
that's a fact? That's your opinion.
Wait, and speaking of him being drafted as number one overall, which you said he wasn't deserving of, Robert, why was he drafted number one overall?
Yeah, that's the question that you need to be asking, is why was he drafted number one overall? Number one, he was drafted first overall because he was the best high school player in the country. Now, if that's a bust and he doesn't deserve to be picked number one, then that's your opinion. It's not a fact. The man got almost 21 win shares across his career. Okay, 21 win shares, despite barely playing minutes.
He was an NBA player.
Hold on. 21 win shares. You know how many?
I want to hear that guy.
You know how many win shares Adam Morrison had? He was the third overall pick, right? How many win shares he had in his entire career? Negative 1.4.
11. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Negative 1.4. So where's the Adam Morrison is the biggest bust in NBA history? Where's Anthony Bennett's the biggest bust in NBA history? I'll tell you what happened. So Kwame Brown was picked first overall by the Washington Wizards. President of basketball operations at the time was Michael Jordan. He didn't really know what he was doing. Accordingly, again, everyone wants to say Michael Jordan didn't know what he was doing. Michael Jordan actually did know what he was doing as an executive. He came to clear cap space. He did that. He cleared a lot of big contracts from the Wizards from 2000 to 2001. He came to win games, which he did. The 2 years that he played for the Wizards, they were significantly better than they were the years before. And he came to make them money. And guess what? He did that too. So basically, he was framed as a failed GM, even though he was quite successful. So this notion of what is a failure and what is successful, honestly, we need to evaluate that first. Now, Kwame Brown was picked by the Wizards. They had no intention of keeping him, by the way. The deal on the table was Kwame Brown for Elton Brand, Chicago Bulls, and Brand was a NBA-ready player. He had already played 2 years for the Bulls. The Bulls had no interest in paying the man max contract when he was up. What ended up happening was the Bulls played both sides against the middle. So they had a deal with the LA Clippers, who had the second pick and had picked Tyson Chandler. And they also had a deal with the Wizards, who had the first pick with Kwame Brown. Turns out, after the pick was already made, because you don't get to undo a pick. Once you make it, you own it, right? If the deal falls apart afterwards, sucks for you. That's the rule.
Andre Bargnani.
Why shout out Bargnani right now? Yeah, okay.
That was
so my point is that they had this deal in place, and last second the Bulls wanted a second player. The Wizards weren't willing to give up anything more, and next thing you know, they made the trade for Tyson Chandler. The rest is history, and Michael Jordan was pissed, and they put out offers. They put out feelers. Who wants Kwame Brown? People did not want him, because back then he's an 19-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid, unproven, coming out of high school, making major money, because a first overall pick salary was higher than a mid-level exception back then, and people didn't want to develop him. And still is. So people didn't want to develop that. It's a big contract. And you know what? The Chicago Bulls came out laughing in a sense, but they also failed too, because they traded away a productive all-star in Elton Brand because they didn't want to pay him. and Brand went on to be a really productive player for the Clippers, although he unfortunately went to the
He did.
Clippers. My point is, Michael Jordan abused Kwame Brown because, frankly, he was not on his timeline. This is a 38, 39-year-old guy who came back to play 1 or 2 seasons, and now you got an 18-year-old kid who's not NBA ready. But find me an 18-year-old kid, apart from LeBron James, who was ever ready. So you want to say Kwame Brown's a bust, Kwame Brown's this, he didn't live up to hypes. Okay, fine. Okay, he had small hands, he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that, fine. But Kevin Garnett was not NBA ready at 18. And Kevin Garnett, we can all agree, is a generational talent. Tracy McGrady sat on the bench in Toronto. He was not ready to win basketball games. Every one of these players who succeeded came into a situation where a team had veterans. They were not expected to lead the team. Now, next thing you know, Kwame Brown's playing 5 minutes. People are like, oh, they're losing because Kwame Brown's a bust. That's a lot of pressure to put on an 18-year-old kid. You know what I mean? So
100%.
we need to reevaluate what we're considering successful and failure, because again, like the grander point here is, did he live up to your expectation? No. Is he a success in my book? Hell yes. Do you know the odds of making do you know the odds of making the NBA as a high school senior? They're less than 0.03%. Do you know the odds of basically going from that to being the first overall pick? Only 2 players in NBA history have gone from high school to the first overall pick. Kwame Brown, LeBron James, right? An average NBA career is less than 5 years. Kwame played over a decade. Okay, he made $63 million at a time where most players were retiring with under 50 million in earnings. Big money now, but
he bought his mom the house at 18.
Right, and he got screwed over for a lot of money too because of the politics. Because it's really hard as a team to sell your fan base that we're going to sign Kwame Brown for $80 million, and you know Stephen A. Smith is on a podcast saying, "Oh, this man's a bust. This guy's a bona fide." Well, that's going to unfortunately impact how much money you can give the guy. So this guy made $63 million while everyone was saying he's a bust. While they screwed up his development, he could have made over 120 million. So in that sense, yeah, he has a right to be pissed.
I think we have to
about
separate
that one, about his background, because I'm sure you don't know too much about his background.
Yeah, I didn't know all that backstory about his father being in prison specifically. But I think the reason that he's considered a bust is because he was the number 1 overall pick. Because two big men went right behind him, who are basically Hall of Famers, all-stars.
Who's a Hall of Famer? Tyson Chandler's a Hall of Famer.
Pau Gasol, sorry. Okay, Chandler's more of an all-star.
One guy.
Chandler's more of an all-star. But two very well-regarded big men were drafted right behind him. And like you said, he went to a team where he wasn't ready. He wasn't the guy. He wasn't supposed to be on that team in the first place. But I think we have to separate personal success from league success, because he was a bust in the context of the NBA, in the context of the expectations that were placed upon him coming into the NBA. And he's not the only one. You mentioned Anthony Bennett. You mentioned Andrea Bargnani. Like, those are 2 number 1 overall picks who also failed to meet expectations. He's not the first ever quote unquote failed NBA draft pick, but we can say in the context there were other players that could have been drafted in that spot who went on to have better careers. So yeah, he had an okay career. He had an NBA career.
This is unfair, because when you say it that way, you make it sound like it's all on the player, right? Like the development doesn't matter, right? It's just like Pau Gasol could have been an all-star anywhere. Well, no way. You want to say Pau Gasol could have been an all-star in Washington? You want to say Eddie Curry would have succeeded and gotten a max contract from New York if he'd gone to Washington and been abused by Michael Jordan? And pardon my French, Michael Jordan called him a flaming faggot every day in practice. That's true. That's 100% true. So at 18 years old, dude, man, I know men who are 40 years old who would break under that kind of pressure. You put that pressure on an 18-year-old and say, okay, well, now you gotta succeed in that. I'm sorry, man. There's a lot of politics that goes on with success and failure, but there's a lot of like the evolution of psychology. I think there's a lot of psychology that goes into this too. So the psychology of the fans, he's a first overall pick. Now, let me ask you a question. Is Cade Cunningham going to be a failure because he's not LeBron James? Because they're both going to be first overall picks, right?
No, I mean you can't compare every number 1 overall pick to every other.
So that's great. I'm glad that you said that, because 2001 was a notoriously weak draft, and so was 2000. So saying Michael Olowokandi is a failure because he's not Tim Duncan, or Tim Duncan's okay, let's take a really successful first overall pick, Blake Griffin. Is Blake Griffin a failure because he's not Shaquille O'Neal? Is Anthony Davis a failure because he's not Hakeem Olajuwon? Do you know what I mean?
No.
So Hakeem Olajuwon a failure because he's not Michael Jordan? You see what I mean? Like I get your point, but there's a larger story here, okay? In 2001, there were 5 high school seniors who came into the NBA draft, okay? In 2002, there were 25 high school seniors who were planning to go to the NBA draft. Now, do you know what happens when too many good high school players go to the NBA? The NCAA.
The colleges lose their money.
The NCAA loses millions and millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
So they sent their little henchmen like Stephen A. Smith and these little, CBS sports people. They sent them and they said, "You make an example out of this Kwame Brown kid because he's humble and he doesn't say shit. He doesn't say anything. So you go and say that this is a bust. This is a bust." And to all you other kids watching, you high school people thinking of skipping college, this is what happens when you skip college. You're not ready.
I think it was only 2 or 3 years later that they outlawed guys.
It was 5 years later. It was 5 years later.
5 years later. That
so the year. Now here's the irony of things. So this is a Raptors podcast. I guess you have a lot of Raptor fans.
Yeah.
The rule that outlawed high school players coming into the NBA draft, had that rule not been changed, the 2006 draft that the Raptors won the first overall pick and drafted Andrea Bargnani, you know who would have declared for that draft?
Who?
Kevin Durant and Greg Oden.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
So that's who you missed out on because of that rule change. Now, the irony of ironies is they didn't do this to LeBron James. They only did it to Kwame Brown because they didn't mind the exceptions. Once in a while, a player does this, no problem. Kobe did it. Tracy did it, no problem. But LeBron was a
generational talent. Kwame was not. Kwame wasn't that. I mean,
look, man.
And honestly, Robert, based on what you said there,
mm-hmm.
what you just said just recently,
mm-hmm.
I have an interesting question for you.
Sure.
I got to ask you. I really want to hear your take on this. How has the media treated Kwame? Like using Stephen A., Matt Barnes, Skip number 2, because this is my Skip right here. Like, how have they utilized him to deteriorate his reputation in this media to tear him down right now, even though this guy is, like I said earlier, killing the internet? What do you think about the way the media, their talking points and their narrative that they're trying to sell as opposed to what he's saying?
Find me one white athlete in the history of any sport that they have done this to. Find me a white athlete that has been torn to shreds the way that Tiger has, the way that MJ has, the way that Kobe was, Kaepernick, every one of these guys, okay? LeBron, to some extent, even though I think that he's part of the go along, get along crew that, Kwame's talking about. We love to tear down black men. We really do, especially, by the way, when they don't play the game. Now, you know who didn't play the game? Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson didn't play the game. Now, Allen Iverson is a Hall of Famer. Allen Iverson is one of the toughest guys ever. Yeah, Muhammad Abdul-Rauf. There's Craig Hodges. Many. Craig Hodges was blackballed from the NBA for writing writing a letter to George Bush. Okay, we need these black kids in inner cities to know that hooping is what you're going to be measured by. So we love to tear down black athletes. It's a gross practice. It does not happen to white people in the same way. I'm not crying racism. I'm saying double standard. Okay.
No, I mean that's undeniable.
Okay.
Whether you're shredding a guy or whether you're just criticizing his play, there's all these loaded phrases that get used. Yeah, I understand. There's a whole lot of that.
So loaded phrases. Let's use this as a teaching moment, Skip. Now you said bust. You said he's a bust, and it's unquestionable. It's a fact. Okay. Now, bust. This is a bust. Just like Steven Jackson said, this man's life is dirt. Okay. dirt bust.
I don't equate those two things. Yeah.
But
if you call someone
Jalen Rose retired the word bust because he said that is crazy talk, right? Because there's a lot of, and I agree with that. I think the concept of a bust should be retired because that's personal. Okay, bust is personal. It's your opinion about somebody. It's not basketball related. It's not analytic related. I can tell you that Kwame Brown is one of the best centers during his time in the NBA. He was one of the best centers in the NBA defensively. I can also tell you that he averaged a double-double in 2 quarters when he was playing for the Bobcats. I'm happy to say that he definitely didn't have the career that people were expecting to, but I'm also going to tell you that comes down to development programs. Now, consider the way that the Raptors are considered a great development team, right? Now, it's kind of interesting how when a player develops well, we say, wow, the system. Kawhi Leonard becomes an all-star, becomes a generation talent. Oh, it's Popovich. Oh, it's the system. You know, Popovich is a white guy, and the system is run by white guys, and R.C. Buford's a great GM, and he's a white guy. White guy. But if Kawhi had failed, he's lazy, he's a bust. He didn't work out. He didn't work hard enough. How come?
Lazy is a bad one. Lazy is a bad one. Lazy is a very loaded word. Well, to me, the word bust just encapsulates someone that didn't live up to your expectations.
But why does that person have to deal with your expectations? Hold on. Let me ask you a question. Let me tell you a story about Kwame Brown. Kwame Brown was 13 years old, and this man did not have shoes. Okay.
He didn't have any shoes, man.
He didn't have shoes.
6 feet.
Size 13 shoes, and he didn't have shoes on. So he's seen a guy playing basketball, and he said, "Hey man, I'll play you ball barefoot for those shoes." Okay. So he wins. He leaves the park that day with shoes on. Okay. This is a kid who grew up in poverty. This is a kid who grew up in the South. A lot of racism in the South. Okay. This is a kid who grew up in a single parent household. Dad was in prison. Okay. I'm not saying this because I'm not saying this the same way, the same reason that a lot of people in the media are saying this. Oh, fear him because his dad went to prison. I'm saying, as somebody who lost his dad at the age of 11, it's really hard to grow up without a father. Okay. Single parent household can be tough. Okay. You too.
Right here.
So you take that. Okay. Fast forward from that moment, not having shoes, 5 years later, $12 million in your bank account. How the hell is that a bust? How the hell is that a bust? This guy worked so hard. Do you know he played an entire year of high school with a broken hand?
I did not know that.
Exactly.
I think we have to separate what we consider a bust in the sports world versus what we consider a bust in life. It's the same with, I say this about sports hate all the time. Like sports fans will say, I hate Derek Jeter. I hate him because he beats my team every year. Or I hate LeBron. It doesn't mean I hate LeBron as a human being. I think he's a very successful, a great person. He does a lot of good for the world. But on the court, when he's playing the Raptors, I hate his guts. And it's the same when we criticize players. We have to understand, every player that has ever made the NBA is in the top 0.1% of all basketball players. They are amazing basketball players. I can yell at Kwame Brown all I want. I would not step on a basketball court against him. He would dominate me. He'd dominate any of us. He's clearly a superior basketball player in the context of the worldwide, all the people out there who play basketball. But when it comes to within the league, within the context, within the circumstances that he was put into, being the number 1 overall pick, having Michael Jordan on his team, that's a lot to put up with. And he didn't live up to that expectation. And that expectation was unrealistic. 99% of the world can't live up to that expectation. But the fact is, in the sports context, it was supposed to be something that he never turned into. That's what you're talking about.
You're calling him a bust.
Okay, let's be fair.
So basically, you're calling him a bust, Skip?
Look,
in the context of the NBA.
You're doubling down on what you said earlier. Okay, now you may not know a lot about Kwame Brown's career, and that's fine because he was in Washington and you're in Toronto, and there's no reason for you to have followed his career. But I'm sure you followed the career of Andrea Bargnani, right?
Sure.
Here in Toronto, okay? And I'm sure a lot of people. There you go. Now, Skip probably does not like Andrea Bargnani. You don't like Andrea Bargnani. And a lot of people watching probably don't like Andrea Bargnani. But unlike you guys, I actually watched Andrea Bargnani in 2003, 2004, 2005.
I did.
Okay? You watched him in 2003.
Before
That's
he
a
was on
lie. Liar. 2003. What team?
I've been watching the Raptors. I've been watching the
Raptors. We're talking before he got drafted.
We're talking Andrea in Italy. Okay.
Are you kidding me? Those games?
What games?
Oh my god!
What team?
I didn't even want to watch those games.
What team?
The stuff he was doing outside of Toronto, I didn't even bother watching. To be honest, when Andrea Bargnani got drafted, first of all, I was ready to cut ties with the Raptors, and at that point, I was a big time Raptors fan.
Yeah, okay. I don't follow draft prospects. Anyway, moving on.
Completely backwards. Okay, Andrea Bargnani was, for all intents and purposes, one of the best players in Europe. He was not a consensus number 1 overall pick. There were a lot of people saying Rudy Gay, LaMarcus Aldridge. In fact, whatever. There was no consensus number 1 overall pick in that draft.
It was also a bit of a weak draft as well.
It was a very weak draft as well because of the high school players not being allowed to come in and, having to have Greg Oden and, Kevin Durant move into the next year. My point is, he was picked first overall and his development was completely screwed up because he played with Bosch, right? He had a good first year. He had a really good rookie season. He was the second best rookie in the NBA, which is perfectly understandable since he was younger than Brandon Roy. Okay. And Brandon Roy's a guard, and it takes longer for big men to transition. And he played on a 47-win team. Do we forget that? They got the first overall pick, and the next year they were in the playoffs. And
they were good.
He was a big part of that. Him, Jorge Garbajosa,
he was solid. He was solid early on. He was solid. Just didn't live up to.
But then what happened, right? What happened to Andre Bargnani?
We saw the defensive deficiencies. We saw that he couldn't bang inside.
Bull. That's not true. That's not true at all. Okay. It's not true at all. Because I literally broke down this guy's game every single day. I was doing it for Hoops, Fan 590, whatever. I remember, okay? They made this guy put on 35 pounds in the offseason.
Yeah.
And he was never the same player again. Why? Because they needed someone to play against Shaq. And they needed someone to guard Dwight Howard. And guess what? He did a really commendable job guarding those two. His one-on-one post defense was amazing. His rebounding was terrible. I agree. Yeah. Rebounding was terrible. Do you know how many big men in the NBA today average 5 or 6 rebounds a game? Nobody cares. It was just back then. So what you were hating on him for was, hey man, you're a power forward that was asked to put on 30 pounds, which is very unhealthy for your body, by the way. Sports Science 101, very unhealthy for your body. It slowed you down. You were probably homesick, probably feeling, like your development's been screwed up by this team that does not know what the hell they're doing. Okay.
Well, this was before stretch bigs were a big thing, so people didn't really know how to deal with them.
I mean, that's neither here nor there nor true. So you could argue that Dirk. Listen to Dirk Nowitzki. Listen to Dirk Nowitzki talking about Andrea Bargnani in his first year. Listen to it. Go back.
But Dirk wasn't a 3-point shooter to start his career. He moved. Yes, he moved further out.
That's not true. Dirk Nowitzki was a 3-point shooter even in Europe. He was a 3-point shooter even in Europe. I remember watching his games in Europe. I'm telling you, he was. He wasn't a great shooter when he came to the NBA. He became a much better one because he does have a dedicated shooting coach that he's been working with, and he figured out the low post mid game. My point is, Andrea Bargnani got glowing endorsements from a lot of players in the NBA, including Dirk Nowitzki, who said, by the way, this is a direct quote from Dirk Nowitzki about Andrea Bargnani at 19. He's much, much better than me at my age. Okay, so the Raptors the Raptors picked a really good player first overall, and then they screwed up his development. And then they turned the fans against him, right? Because they don't want to take accountability for that. I guarantee you today, if Andrea Bargnani, same player, same guy, 18, 19-year-old from Benetton, was drafted to the Raptors today and had leadership like Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, these guys, had a training staff like Alice McKechnie, had a coach like Nick Nurse who could utilize him properly instead of a dimwit like Sam Mitchell, okay? You take that different situation, I swear to God, this guy would turn into a generational all-star. But that's on him, right? Because he busted.
I don't entirely agree with that. I mean, there's an argument. There's an argument for it. I think
what was wrong with his game? What was wrong with his game? At 19 years old, he was a great shooter. He was a very capable ball handler. He was an amazing passer. He had great lateral quickness. He had elite length. He was a good shot blocker. Yeah, he didn't rebound properly. Okay, that's an effort thing. Maybe he had an adenoid problem as well. He was constantly, breathing through his mouth, which is creating a lot of issues. My point is, we like to simplify things in sports and say, well, this guy's a bust, and this guy didn't work hard, and this guy's a bust. But the reality of the situation is, Minnesota can't be this bad at drafting players. Every player they pick is a bust. Karl Anthony Towns.
It's their development.
It's development. It's coaching, and the average fan does not see. The average fan does not see that. The average fan says, "Oh, this guy's not scoring 25 points per game. He must be a bust." Okay, he was picked first overall. He's not scoring 20 points. He must be a bust. But those fans are not looking at the analytics. Okay, now there are a lot of players that probably don't get called out for being a bust. Right? They don't get called out for the trash that they're doing on the court. But believe me, when you look at the numbers, they're doing trash. Now, Gary Trent Jr. right now for the Raptors, a lot of fans are not hugging with this guy a little bit, right? Because he scored 44 points, big outburst, big 3-point shooting. I would rather have Kwame Brown. Winner. I'd rather have Kwame Brown than Gary Trent, because one of them plays defense, the other one didn't. So I mean, it's like how are you watching the game, right? If you know what you're watching for, then players who set really good picks, players who box out, maybe don't get the rebound, players who make good reads, players who make passes to the pass. Those guys aren't going to show up on the box score, and you're still going to think they're a bust, but they're helping you win.
Well, Robert, that's kind of like what I tell a lot of people that have been following to the point. It's a lot of Toronto Raptors, Toronto Maple Leafs fans, Toronto Blue Jays fans. Once they see the team lose a couple games, they start freaking out, and they don't get into the analytics. Get rid of this guy. This guy's a bust. This guy's nothing. This guy's whack. This guy's weak. Get rid of him. It happens a lot in our city. I'm glad you're also a Toronto dude as well. I do have a final question for you, my friend. Mm-hmm. How has it that Kwame Brown breaking the internet, going nuts, speaking on the NBA and the world, what effects do you think? Like, this is totally you, brother. I'm going to sit there. I want to hear this, man. Like, on players, younger players coming up, players in the league, people in the media, everything that's going on. Michael Jordan, LeBron, like him going off. How has this affected the world? What do you think about this?
I think politically speaking, right, and psychologically speaking, it's going to change the narrative. The first time somebody told you that professional wrestling was fake, you never looked at it the same way again, right?
100%.
So when somebody really exposes the media bias this way, the fake tough guys like Steven Jackson and Becky with the good hair, and these people, right? When somebody exposes these guys, the go along, get along crew, right? When somebody gets you to start thinking critically, it never stops, because it's like a thread and it just keeps unraveling. Okay, let me tell you what I think is going to happen. I think a lot of people, first of all, I think Kwame's about to get assassinated publicly. Okay, I think a lot of people are going to come at him really hard, because he's taken a lot of people down. He's called a lot of people out. I think a lot of people are going to come at him. They're going to probably point to the fact that he might be a conservative politically, which is a no-no in the Black community. I think a lot of people are going to point out to his, use of the N-word. They're going to use, like, oh, he's a little bit, anti-intellectual, hide your kids, hide blah, blah, blah. Same shit,
hide your wife.
Yeah. They're going to call him misogynistic because, even though, like, they're going to say he's anti-women because he said, mind your thing to Jamel Hill. There's a lot. If you really give it enough time. But I'll tell you what, though. The reason that this guy's become so successful is because they didn't get to paint him before he painted himself. And he wasn't stupid enough to go on the Breakfast Club and allow them to cut a 5-minute clip and edit around him and make him look like an idiot. He kept it on his own platform. Number one.
Donkey of the day.
Yeah. Yep. So he didn't use Twitter. He used Instagram and YouTube, which is long form content. And he's gone, viral, basically, with all his videos have gone viral. Why? Number one, he's speaking truth. A lot of things that he's saying are hitting home. Number two, it's a very universal thing. Very universal. Every one of us has dreamt of conquering the high school bullies that picked on us. So the narrative is not true. Okay, the way he's saying it, it's not true. Like he's saying, oh, they've been picking on me for 20 years. Okay, that's not really true. It's not like they're talking about you every single day. But the narrative is beautiful, because for those who don't know, who's going to sit there and say, okay, let's see what Skip Bayless talked about every single day for the last 20 years. Kwame's saying they talked about me for 20 years, so they believe it. Okay, people like this narrative. People like the underdog.
Yeah.
And this guy who's the first overall pick, he's 7 feet tall, he's 280 pounds, he made $63 million, and he's convinced you that he's an underdog, which is amazing to me. Psychologically, it's amazing because he's using their tool against them. Now, they made money all these years talking crap about all sorts of players. Him, Allen Iverson, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. They love assassinating black athletes. Now he's doing the same thing to them. And I think it's great because he's using it to his own platform. And he believes, and I believe also, this guy is talking the same points as Thomas Sowell. A lot of black leaders, Malcolm X. There's a lot of people who've challenged the Democratic Party. A lot of people, right? So his message politically, exactly. It's challenging the narrative. It's getting people to think. It's getting people to say, hey, wait a second. Just because you're black doesn't mean you have to be a Democrat. Just because, these guys are saying this guy's a bust, go think about it for yourself. I think once you get enough people questioning, that questioning turns into something. So I don't know what
turns into a conversation, right?
Exactly.
Like what we're doing right now.
Go look at every Steven Jackson, all these guys that he criticized. Go look at their Instagram feeds right now and check their comments. Every single person's calling them out for everything. DJ Envy made fun of a black man today for not being able to read, and he used it as a ha-ha joke, okay? Because the man couldn't read. People ripped him to shreds. Why? Because they started saying, look at you, DJ Envy, trying to tear down another black man. So, you know what? Thank you, Kwame Brown. Thank you, Kwame Brown, for showing the hypocrisy. Thank you, Kwame Brown, for starting the conversation. Thank you for speaking your mind. I hope you take this somewhere great because you're going to get a podcast deal or something. And I hope the people that, really tuned into him for the ha-ha jokes, because he's funny as hell. I hope the people that tuned in for the jokes will stick around for the message, because I think what he has to say, it's not all right. A lot of it is probably misguided. Some of it's wrong. I don't agree with everything he's saying, but he's a smart dude, and he's pointing out something that challenges something that is broken in our society, and I love it.
I think I just want to weigh in real quick.
Hold on, Skip. Speaking of podcasts and thanking people, thank you for being on our podcast, Robert. This is great. Skip, do you have any final things to say before we head out? I just
want to say that I don't necessarily think he's totally woke. There's some stuff that he's saying that's very important, but a lot of it seems to come from a very fragile place, from my personal opinion, of people criticizing him and just being very fragile about that. So I just want to say that. Okay. I'm not going to touch on all the other stuff. We don't have time, but.
Okay. Being as someone that is not white, that grew up in a white society, I can tell you a lot of the things from my own personal experience that he has said is true. A lot of the things, man, I could tell you that straight up. And guys, I really enjoyed this conversation. Robert, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Skip. I'm so delighted, so elated, so enlightened to hear the words that came out of your mouth. We wish nothing but the best of you, my friend. We wish nothing but the best of you being a good friend of our show to come on. Anytime you want to talk ball, you know my ears are big. So great having you on the show, man. Oh, well, we appreciate it more than you, man. Like, I'm telling you, this is so great. So on behalf of myself, Skip, and Robert, that man right there, from To The Point, you guys know what to do. Go down there, click subscribe, click like, let us know what you think. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, and
peace.